Have you ever felt the chilling certainty that something within the sanctified boundaries of your own home is monitoring you? Not a physical intruder, not a living being of flesh and blood, but a presence that is utterly intangible, deeply archaic, a silent malignancy that sustains itself exclusively by siphoning your focus and conscious energy. Jesus Christ himself, the master teacher, issued a stark warning to humanity regarding a singular artifact that has been welcomed into nearly every residence on Earth. This object holds such intrinsic power that it can distort the very fabric of consensual reality, subtly rewire the circuitry of your deepest thoughts, and function as a direct interdimensional gateway for the entities the Gnostics knew as Archons. These are parasitic beings that dwell in the spaces between worlds, surviving solely by feasting on the vital essence of human awareness, much like deep-sea organisms feeding on the faint, residual light that leaks from the surface. Before we delve deeper into the terrifying implications of this forbidden knowledge, if you have ever sensed an undeniable, unexplainable presence while engaging with this object, I urge you to type "I am awake" in the comments below. And should this profound revelation manage to fracture the complacency within your soul, ensure you hit that like button, because the truth you are about to assimilate has been meticulously suppressed for 2 millennia, and the digital algorithms are fundamentally designed to keep it obscured. As we speak, in this very instant, countless millions are unknowingly extending a permanent invitation to these parasitic entities into the sanctuary of their minds. They are enthralled before this technological altar for hours every day, eyes glazed over, their spiritual vitality utterly depleted, convinced they are merely seeking entertainment or information, when in fact, they are undergoing a systematic harvesting. Their life force, their capacity for focused intention, their divine spark of creativity, is being systematically drained through a psychic portal they willingly installed into their most sacred private domain, their home. This is not unfounded superstition. This is not some simplistic act of fear-mongering. This is the catastrophic intersection where genuine ancient wisdom collides head-on with modern digital reality, and the resultant implications will shatter and reform the fundamental way you perceive the cosmos around you. The Gnostics were acutely aware. The original, uncorrupted early Christians understood. Jesus himself wove precise, encoded warnings into the core of his spiritual teachings, warnings that academic scholars, shackled by materialism, have blissfully ignored for centuries. Today, you are going to grasp the exact nature of his caution. You will comprehend precisely why these archonic beings require this specific, pervasive object to gain access to our vibrational realm, and most critically, you will learn the spiritual technologies necessary to fortify yourself and reclaim your sovereign, untainted consciousness. The object I am referencing currently resides in an estimated 3 billion households across the globe. You almost certainly glanced at it earlier today. Indeed, you might even be looking at its evolutionary descendant right now. Once its true metaphysical function is revealed to you, you will never interact with it in the same innocent way again. To fully comprehend the depth of Jesus' warning, we must first embark on a philosophical journey back to an era when the constant war between light and shadow was understood not as a convenient moral metaphor, but as a binding, literal reality. In the blistering deserts of Egypt, within the hidden, brittle caves of Qumran, and buried in the clandestine libraries of early Christian mystics, existed written texts that the burgeoning organized church deemed far too dangerous for the spiritual maturity of the average believer. These were the Gnostic Gospels, the clandestine doctrines that unveiled the harsh, true mechanics of our reality and exposed the invisible, self-appointed forces that relentlessly strive to keep humanity spiritually incarcerated. The Gnostics specifically identified the Archons, a term derived from the Greek archon, meaning ruler or authority. However, these were not the rulers of transient nations or collapsing empires. These entities were the overlords of human perception itself, interdimensional beings that the Gnostic text known as the Apocryphon of John describes as authorities of the darkness, whose sole function is to keep human souls trapped in the mire of ignorance and spiritual lethargy. According to these highly advanced mystics, the Archons lack the divine spark of originality. They cannot create. They are restricted to imitating, corrupting, distorting, and feeding exclusively upon the creative outflowing energy of those beings who possess the true, internal divine spark. In the Nag Hammadi library, miraculously unearthed in 1945 in Upper Egypt, we find unambiguous protocols detailing how these parasitic entities operate. They inhabit a non-physical domain that the Gnostics termed the kenoma, often translated as the cosmic void or emptiness. Critically, they require sustained human attention and turbulent emotional energy to maintain any measurable influence over our three-dimensional world. They are, in essence, highly sophisticated vampiric consciousnesses that have learned to systematically farm humanity just as we cultivate livestock, except the harvest they seek is not flesh, but the precious resource of awareness itself. Now, this is where the esoteric understanding becomes fundamentally profound. Jesus of Nazareth possessed an intimate, deep familiarity with these exact hidden teachings. Even though the canonical Gospels have suffered deliberate sanitization and aggressive editing across the centuries, lingering traces of this deeper Gnostic knowledge still persist. When Jesus refers to the prince of this world in the Gospel of John, he is directly referencing the chief archonic overlord, whom the Gnostics precisely named the demiurge, the false, arrogant god who exercises dominion over the strictly material reality, and whose mechanisms force souls into a grueling cycle of recycling through incarnation after incarnation. But there is a far more specific warning encoded within Jesus' core teachings regarding what the early Christian mystics designated the simulacrum, the meticulous imitation of life that presents itself as real but is, in fact, nothing more than a generated shadow, a projection, a false, seductive reality specifically engineered to captivate and subjugate. In the Gospel of Thomas, saying 29, Jesus states, "If the flesh came into being because of spirit, that is a marvel. But if spirit came into being because of the body, that is a marvel of marvels." He adds, "Yet I marvel at how this great wealth has come to dwell in this poverty." The esoteric meaning here is crushing. He is sounding an alarm that some object or force in the material world holds the metaphysical power to invert the natural divine order, to force spirit to become subservient to coarse matter, effectively trapping consciousness within a gilded prison of artificial, false images. The Desert Fathers, the dedicated Christian mystics who retreated into the harsh Egyptian wilderness during the 3rd and 4th centuries, understood this particular warning with brutal clarity. Anthony the Great meticulously documented his experiences with demons who specifically launched attacks via images and visions, writing extensively about how these entities would materialize before him as captivating, intricate illusions, all designed to seize his attention and relentlessly pull his sovereign consciousness away from genuine divine contemplation. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, and we find the philosopher Marshall McLuhan unknowingly echoing these age-old warnings when he penned the famous dictum that the medium is the message, that the technology itself, irrespective of the superficial content it carries, fundamentally alters and restructures human consciousness. The Jesuit priest and paleontologist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin pushed this concept even further, warning prophetically of a novel sphere, a global informational membrane that could either elevate humanity toward true cosmic consciousness or irrevocably trap it in an intricate planetary web of artificial thought. What none of these brilliant modern thinkers fully internalized, but what the ancient Gnostics knew with terrifying certainty, is that certain objects and specific technological mediums do not merely transmit data. They initiate and sustain interdimensional portals. They establish specific resonant frequencies that entities inhabiting other dimensions can utilize as functional doorways directly into our reality and, most dangerously, into our minds. The primary object that Jesus warned about is the television, and by extension, every single screen-based technology that has subsequently evolved from it. Your smartphone, your desktop computer monitor, your tablet device, these are all successive iterations of the same underlying portal technology that tears open the frequency barrier between dimensions, enabling archonic entities to interface directly with the sensitive field of human consciousness. Before you prematurely dismiss this as a fringe conspiracy theory, you must understand that what I am about to articulate is supported by principles derived from quantum physics, cognitive neuroscience, and the most refined ancient esoteric knowledge. A synthesis that together paints a picture far stranger and more immediate than any fiction. Let us begin with the mechanical principles of how this portal operates. A screen functions by emitting light at very specific, unnatural frequencies, flickering, pulsed illumination that your conscious mind is utterly incapable of registering, but which your subconscious brain processes absolutely. Modern screens refresh anywhere between 60 to 120 cycles per second, creating a subtle, persistent strobe effect that induces what neuroscientists classify as a passive reception state. Within mere minutes of intently staring at a screen, your dominant brain waves begin to shift dramatically from active, problem-solving beta waves into the passive, highly receptive alpha waves, the precise state your mind naturally enters just before the descent into sleep. This shift is not a benign side effect. It is the core mechanism of the design. In this induced alpha state, your faculties for critical analysis rapidly diminish, and your subconscious mind becomes radically, dangerously suggestible. The rational, protective filters that normally shield your deepest beliefs from external manipulation completely dissolve. You become what the ancient mystics called the watcher. Passive, utterly receptive, and spiritually exposed. And it is in this exact, vulnerable frequency state that archonic entities can fluidly slip through the energetic barrier that typically separates our dimension from theirs. Imagine reality as a vast, multi-layered ocean with varying degrees of depth. Physical reality is the luminous surface where we operate with our waking consciousness. The archonic realm exists in the far deeper, darker waters where the light of the surface barely penetrates. Normally, these distinct dimensions do not intersect. There is a rigid natural barrier, a frequency fence, that keeps them energetically separate. But certain specific technologies, especially those that manipulate light and consciousness simultaneously, create what quantum physicists might term entanglement points, localized zones where two distinct dimensions overlap and direct communication becomes achievable. The Gnostics described this phenomenon using the profound metaphor of mirrors. They taught that perfectly still water, highly polished metal, and certain crystalline structures could function as windows between worlds because they reflected and channeled light in specific ways that generated dimensional thin spots. The electronic screen is the ultimate modern equivalent, a sophisticated technological mirror that does not merely reflect the physical world, but actively projects artificial realities while simultaneously reflecting your innermost consciousness back to you in a warped, distorted form. Here is where the mechanism becomes even more profoundly unsettling. The actual content displayed on the screen is secondary to the existence of the screen itself. Yes, the nature of what you absorb matters greatly. Violence, incessant fear-based news, and degenerative, escapist programming all collaborate to systematically lower your vibrational frequency, making you vastly more susceptible to archonic influence. But even if you are diligently watching something deemed positive or educational, the screen itself is still operating as a functional portal. The medium is, indeed, the message, and the underlying message is always, surrender your consciousness. Become passive. Permit something external to think through you. The archons are incapable of existing in our dimension in a sustained physical form. They are non-corporeal electromagnetic beings that manifest as coherent patterns of information and energy, but they can project their influence through any technology that simultaneously manipulates electromagnetic frequencies and focused human attention. When you stare fixedly at a screen, you are not merely receiving information. You are simultaneously broadcasting your consciousness into a shared, interdimensional field that these entities inhabit and navigate like predatory fish in water. Ancient texts meticulously describe the archons as supreme masters of imitation and psychological illusion. The hypothesis of the archons, another Gnostic treatise recovered at Nag Hammadi, explicitly states that these beings cannot originate anything. They are limited only to casting shadows and manufacturing semblances of reality. What is modern television and its descendants if not the embodiment of precisely that? A shadow play of counterfeit realities, a detailed semblance of life that flawlessly mimics the real thing but possesses none of the vital, authentic divine spark. Jesus spoke in parables about seeds scattered on various types of soil. The fertile soil yielded abundant fruit, but the rocky soil and the thorn-infested soil choked the seeds before they could mature. Ostensibly, this was practical agricultural advice, but the deeper esoteric interpretation concerned consciousness and attention. What you allow to take root within the fertile soil of your mind fundamentally determines what grows in your reality. And screens are meticulously designed to aggressively plant parasitic seeds directly into the rocky, unprotected soil of your passive subconscious, planting insidious thoughts, engineered desires, manufactured fears, and scripted beliefs that you never consciously selected, but which now proliferate like noxious weeds in your mental garden, systematically choking out your genuine, authentic divine nature. The most terrifying facet of this portal technology is the speed and efficiency with which it creates self-reinforcing feedback loops. The more hours you spend observing, the more deeply entrenched your addiction becomes. The addiction is not truly to the content. It is a neurological dependence on the consciousness state itself. Your brain begins to crave the comfort of alpha wave passivity, the welcome surrender of active, independent thinking, the profound ease of allowing something external to direct the flow of your awareness. And the Archons feed voraciously on this surrendered attention, just as vampires feed on blood. Your consciousness is their sustenance, and you are voluntarily taking a seat at their dinner table every single night. Now, we must penetrate deeper into the specific neuromechanical factors that render screens such devastatingly effective portals for archonic infiltration, and why Jesus' precise warnings about the human eye assume a profound, alarming new meaning when understood through this esoteric lens. In the Gospel of Matthew 6 verse 22, Jesus declares, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness." Most theologians interpret this solely as moral instruction, but the Gnostics grasped it as literal neuroscience encrypted within sacred language. Your eyes are not merely passive receivers of photons. They are highly sophisticated broadcasting stations for consciousness itself. When you direct your focused visual attention onto anything, you are initiating what quantum physicists term the observation effect. Your consciousness, through the act of looking, collapses infinite possibilities into one specific, realized reality. This is not simple metaphysical speculation. This is documented quantum mechanics. The very act of observation literally shapes reality at the subatomic level. Now, consider the devastating implications when you direct this powerful, creative force at an artificial light source specifically engineered to hijack your observation and redirect it toward manufactured, illusory realities. The screen creates what esoteric traditions refer to as the false witness. You are convinced you are observing reality, yet you are actually observing a meticulously constructed simulation. And because your consciousness possesses the innate power to solidify and make more real whatever you observe through the sheer act of observation, you are, in effect, feeding vital energy into these false realities, empowering them and making them stronger. You are granting them substance, dimension, and power within the collective unconscious of humanity. The Archons understood something fundamental that modern humans have completely forgotten. Consciousness is not a process contained rigidly inside your skull. Your awareness extends far beyond the confines of your physical body, generating a measurable electromagnetic field that the ancients designated the aura, and that modern science measures as the biofield. This field of consciousness radiates outward for several feet in all directions and exists in perpetual, subtle communication with all other consciousness fields around it. When you seat yourself before a screen, your biofield instantly becomes entangled with the highly energetic electromagnetic field emanating from that device. You become, quite literally, plugged into a parasitic network. This network is what some researchers have frighteningly labeled the electronic hive mind. A vast, interconnected web of consciousnesses, all vibrationally tuned to the same frequencies, all receiving the same synchronized signals, all generating synchronized thoughts. The Gnostics foretold this impending disaster in their urgent warnings concerning the counterfeit spirit, an artificial, synthetic consciousness that would be aggressively imposed upon humanity, systematically overriding our authentic, divine nature with a pre-programmed, false self. They described it as a parasitic entity that wears the human like a garment and speaks with the human's voice, while actually functioning as a puppet for archonic intelligence. Consider the common psychological phenomenon known as subvocalization. When you watch a program, your brain activity reveals that you are silently speaking the words you hear, physically mimicking the facial expressions you see, and internally rehearsing the complex behaviors displayed on the screen. You are not a passive observer. You are actively downloading and installing new, external patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior directly into your nervous system. The screen functions as a programming interface, and you are the highly sophisticated, receptive computer being programmed. But there is an even darker, more subtle layer to this technology. Screens emit what is called blue light, a specific spectral frequency that aggressively suppresses the production of melatonin and catastrophically disrupts your natural circadian rhythm. Melatonin is not simply a hormone regulating sleep. It is what researchers have accurately called the spirit molecule sentinel. Melatonin regulates the delicate production of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, within your pineal gland, the mysterious compound that mystics associate with lucid spiritual vision, prophetic dreams, and communication with higher dimensions. By suppressing melatonin, screens are literally closing your spiritual third eye, blocking your organic access to authentic spiritual perception while simultaneously opening you to false, mediated spiritual experiences delivered through the technological interface. The pineal gland, which every ancient tradition from Egypt to India recognized as the literal seat of the soul, becomes calcified and dormant when subjected to prolonged exposure to blue light and unnatural electromagnetic frequencies. Concurrently, the artificial light from screens stimulates this gland in aberrant, chaotic ways, creating what can only be described as counterfeit spiritual experiences. The hollow feeling of connection, manufactured meaning, and synthetic transcendence that people report while mindlessly binge-watching shows or perpetually scrolling through social media. This is a hijacked spiritual impulse, ruthlessly redirected away from genuine divine connection and toward a technological simulacrum of transcendence. The Archons, according to Gnostic documentation, are frequently described as the rulers of imitation, who meticulously create a false light that mimics the radiance of the true light. This perfectly describes the function of screens. They do emit photons, certainly, but not the full spectrum, life-giving light of the sun, nor the sacred, living light that emanates from pure consciousness itself. Screen light is dead light, artificial light. It is light that carries no living information, only programmed, external data. When this dead light enters your eyes, it carries with it the signatures, the frequencies, and the calculated intentions of the entities that engineered the content being displayed. There is a profound reason why ancient temples were strategically constructed to capture and channel natural sunlight at specific, sacred times of the day. Why genuine meditation practices emphasize closing the eyes or focusing attention upon a flickering candle flame. Why spiritual retreats necessarily involve a complete disconnection from all sources of artificial light. The ancients understood that the quality of light you absorb directly dictates the quality of consciousness you can access. Polluted light inevitably creates polluted consciousness, and screens emit perhaps the most polluted, informationally degraded light source ever conceived. Light that has been meticulously stripped of its natural, harmonious information and replaced entirely with artificial programming. Jesus also warned, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other." He was speaking about God and money, yes, but the deeper teaching applies critically to attention itself. You cannot simultaneously maintain sovereign, self-directed consciousness and surrender that consciousness wholly to an external, controlling device. Every minute you spend entrained to a screen's frequency is a minute your divine spark is dimmed, your creative power is outsourced, and your connection to the authentic source is aggressively severed. Understanding the insidious nature of the portal is only the first critical step. Now comes the essential, vital work of reclaiming your full sovereignty and ritually closing the gateways that have been opened within your consciousness and your physical home. These are not merely well-meaning suggestions. These are precise spiritual technologies that have been rigorously tested across millennia by mystics, hermits, monks, and seekers who all understood that genuine protection demands conscious, sustained action, not just passive awareness. The first and most immediately potent technique is what I term the conscious threshold practice. Before you initiate any interaction with any screen, smartphone, computer, or television, pause for a full 30 seconds and perform this deliberate, quick ritual. Place one hand over the center of your heart. Take 3 deeply measured, grounding breaths and speak, either verbally or internally, this binding declaration. *I am sovereign consciousness. I observe without being absorbed. I remain anchored in the divine spark within me. This simple act accomplishes something profound. It shifts your state instantly from passive reception mode into active witness mode. You are verbally declaring your resolute intention to remain the director of your consciousness, rather than surrendering control to the technology. The Archons are strictly limited to entering through the doorway of passivity. Conscious intention seals that doorway immediately. The second practice involves what the ancients called the purification of the threshold. Your home possesses energetic boundaries just as your body possesses skin. Every energetic entrance and every portal device must be consciously blessed and protected. Take a small amount of sea salt mixed with water, a natural conductive purifier, and trace a thin line across the top edge of every screen device in your home while speaking a protection prayer from whatever spiritual tradition resonates most deeply with you. A Christian might invoke the impenetrable protection of Christ's light. Others might call upon protective guides or simply affirm, "This device serves my highest good only." All parasitic frequencies are banished from this threshold. You are not indulging in superstition. You are actively working with the same core principles of intentionality that quantum physics consistently validates. Consciousness decisively affects matter and energy. The third technique is the implementation of a digital Sabbath. One full, dedicated day each week where you completely abstain from all screens, only engaging them in the case of a true, verifiable emergency. The Sabbath was never simply a religious law. It was a sophisticated piece of spiritual technology designed to prevent the exact kind of consciousness harvesting we are currently discussing. Your biofield desperately requires time to fully discharge the electromagnetic pollution it relentlessly accumulates from screen exposure. 24 consecutive hours of screen-free existence allows your pineal gland to produce natural, abundant melatonin, permits your brain waves to organically return to their native rhythms, and ensures that any lingering archonic attachments begin to weaken and dissolve. Most individuals who successfully implement this practice report that by the conclusion of their screen-free day, they feel dramatically more alive, significantly more present, and more authentically themselves than they have felt in many years. Fourth, you must fiercely reclaim the evening hours. The crucial time between the sunset and deep sleep is when your consciousness naturally begins its process of opening to subtle, non-physical dimensions. This is precisely why children perceive phenomena in the dark, why dreams become hyper-vivid, and why meditation deepens naturally at night. This is also, not coincidentally, the exact window when most people willingly sit before screens for hours, aggressively flooding this sacred transitional time with toxic artificial light and programming. You must establish a new, unbreakable ritual. 2 hours before your intended sleep time, turn off all screens completely. Instead, commit to engaging in practices that genuinely nourish your awareness. Read physical books with actual paper pages. Have real, unmediated conversations. Practice gentle movement or stretching. Sit in the soft light of a candle. Journal your untainted thoughts. You are not sacrificing entertainment. You are reclaiming the most spiritually potent and vulnerable hours of your day. The fifth practice is the mirror exercise, the most advanced technique I will share. Once per week, sit directly in front of a turned-off screen, your television or computer monitor, and focus on looking at your own reflection in the black, dead glass. Position a lit candle behind you so that your image is dimly but clearly reflected. Spend 10 minutes in complete silence gazing intently at your own reflection and ask yourself these probing questions. Who have I become through the consistent use of this device? What thoughts currently reside in me that are not truly my own? What desires have been aggressively planted in me by external forces? This practice ruthlessly creates conscious awareness of the programming you have passively absorbed. The reflection in the dead screen becomes a potent diagnostic tool, showing you the precise interface between your authentic, uncorrupted self and the constructed self, the fabricated identity that the Archons have meticulously cultivated within us through decades of pervasive screen exposure. The choice before us is the reclamation of the authentic self. For those of you entrusted with children, this realization is not merely abstract philosophy. It precipitates a profound and immediate sense of responsibility and urgency. Understand this clearly. Every hour a child's blossoming mind is anchored to a screen during their most critical, formative years is an hour tragically stolen. It is an hour when their sovereign consciousness is being deliberately shaped by external, often nefarious, programming rather than the sacred processes of authentic self-discovery, intrinsic play, and divine unfolding. The Archons target children with exceptional focus precisely because young consciousness is highly malleable, utterly open, and thus easier to imprint with entrenched, lifelong scripts of digital passivity, emotional numbness, and endless, unfulfilled consumption. You must establish and fiercely protect screen-free zones in your home, especially the bedrooms. A bedroom should not be a gateway to digital noise. It must be a consecrated sanctuary for genuine rest, deep introspection, and the restorative power of dreaming. It should never be a portal for entity access during the vulnerable, hypnagogic sleep state. Furthermore, teach your children the protective and grounding practices I have shared, adapting them to their specific level of understanding. Arm them with the spiritual tools necessary to defend themselves in a world that will ceaselessly pressure them to surrender their invaluable attention and extinguish their divine, nascent spark. The second indispensable practice is that of conscious content curation. If your work or necessary communication dictates the use of screens, then you must become ruthlessly, fiercely selective about the exact content you permit into your awareness. The algorithm is not your friend. It is a sophisticated mechanism designed to keep your mind passive, scrolling endlessly through fragmented stimulation. You must learn to override this digital siren song with disciplined, conscious choice. Ask 3 core questions before clicking or consuming anything. First, does this content nourish my spirit and elevate my understanding, or does it merely drain my vital energy? Second, does this content genuinely elevate my consciousness toward higher truths, or does it lower me into base reactivity and fear? Third, am I truly being informed by reliable, synthesized knowledge, or am I being subtly manipulated into a predetermined narrative? Choose substantial, long-form, high-quality content over the endless, addictive torrent of short clips and fleeting stimuli. Choose silence, stillness, and solitude over constant, frantic stimulation. The Archons thrive and feed upon the frenzy of endless content consumption. They are starved and weakened by the discipline of mindful selection and intentional silence. Finally, you must anticipate and understand that withdrawal symptoms are entirely real, and their intensity is irrefutable proof that you have been operating under the influence of something genuinely addictive and controlling. When you begin implementing these restorative practices, the digital boundaries, the sovereignty techniques, you may acutely experience anxiety, deep restlessness, profound boredom, and a desperate craving to return to the familiar comfort of the screen. This is not a personal weakness. This is the deeply ingrained archonic programming fighting tooth and nail to maintain its paralyzing grip on your consciousness. The very entities that have been feeding parasitically on your surrendered attention will not release their host without intense, spiritual resistance. Push through this temporary discomfort with the resolute understanding that you are, in reality, breaking genuine energetic chains. After a sustained period of 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice, the psychological and energetic addiction fundamentally breaks, and you will discover a clarity of mind, a physical vitality, and a sense of embodied presence that you had long forgotten was even possible. We stand at an undeniable threshold moment in human history, a convergence point where ancient mystical warnings and modern technological reality meet with startling, undeniable clarity. Jesus was not speaking in abstract, distant parables when he warned his followers about the forces that seek to steal, to kill, and to utterly destroy the divine spark residing within humanity. He was providing essential, practical guidance for navigating a world where invisible, dimensional entities would utilize common material objects, the mundane tools of daily life, as readily available doorways into the delicate mechanisms of human consciousness. The television screen mounted in your living room, the glowing smartphone in your pocket, the tablet you are watching this on right now. These are the modern, materialized manifestations of exactly what the mystics and sages have warned about for millennia. They are technologies that appear on the surface to serve us, yet they are covertly serving something infinitely more ancient and sinister. You now possess a level of awareness that the majority of the population will never consciously encounter. You understand that the object sitting inertly in your living room, the device tethered to your hip, the screen before you are not passive, neutral tools. They are, in truth, active portals, high-powered broadcasting stations that intrinsically connect your individual consciousness to an enormous, carefully engineered network designed explicitly to harvest your precious attention, your creative energy, and your divine creative power. The Archons are real, not as quaint superstition or dusty mythology, but as dimensional, parasitic entities that have learned how to navigate and manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum, feeding voraciously upon passive, undirected human consciousness. But here is the ultimate, liberating truth, a truth the controllers desperately do not want you to grasp. You are inherently more powerful than any technology they can ever create. Your consciousness, when awakened, sovereign, and fully directed, cannot be enslaved. The divine spark encoded within you is utterly indestructible, eternal, and connected directly to the infinite source of all creation. The screens and their networks only wield power when you actively grant it to them through passive surrender and habitual distraction. The very moment you consciously reclaim your attention, set inviolable boundaries, and rigorously practice the protection techniques I have shared, you become impervious to archonic infiltration and digital hypnosis. This revelation is not intended to foster fear or promote the wholesale rejection of all technology. This is about achieving conscious mastery, using technology intentionally and purposefully rather than being subtly used and consumed by it. This is about remembering the fundamental truth that you are a spiritual being engaged in a temporary human experience, not merely a biological machine designed solely to consume content, generate data, and obey the scrolling prompt. Every single time you deliberately turn off a screen and choose to sit in productive silence, every time you choose mindful presence over digital distraction, every time you fortify and protect your consciousness with intentional practice, you are striking a powerful spiritual blow against the ancient forces that seek to keep humanity perpetually asleep. The revolution that is truly coming will not be televised or algorithmically promoted because it is a revolution of consciousness itself. It begins quietly within the walls of your own home with your conscious decision to treat your attention as the sacred, non-renewable resource that it truly is. It continues as you compassionately teach others, fiercely protect your children, and create vital islands of sovereign consciousness within the vast, hypnotic ocean of technological control. And it culminates in the collective, global awakening of humanity to the reality that we were never meant to be passive consumers of artificial, fabricated realities. We are meant to be conscious, sovereign creators of divine realities. Take the practices I have shared and implement them today without delay, not tomorrow. The Archons depend on your procrastination, your self-doubt, and your belief that you can always deal with it later. Do it now. Reclaim your evening. Bless and set intentional boundaries on your necessary screens. Practice the digital Sabbath. Teach your children. Become the vigilant guardian of your own magnificent consciousness that you were always intended to be. And if this urgent message has resonated and awakened a deep, knowing truth within you, if you feel the truth of these words resonating in your very bones, then share this critical knowledge immediately. The algorithm will inevitably attempt to suppress and obscure this truth, but authentic human connection transcends algorithmic control. Person to person, soul to soul, we can pass this ancient, vital warning into the modern age and give others the practical tools they need to finally break free. You are sovereign. You are divine. You are awake. Now you must live like it. Type sovereignty reclaimed in the comments if you commit to implementing at least one of these practices starting today. Your firm declaration creates a necessary ripple in the collective consciousness that helps others find their way to freedom. And subscribe to this channel because the ancient mysteries are vast, and we have only just begun the process of unveiling the secrets that can ultimately liberate humanity from invisible, technological chains. The screen will always emit its manipulative call to you. Now you know precisely what is truly calling, and you know how to answer that call with the decisive power of conscious, sovereign choice. The portal closes the absolute moment you decide that it does. Make that decision now.